of course, you have to put the work in even when you're not getting the return on investment, because that's what the third day is when you're doing a lot of work. It's like if you have a day and you're selling something, let's say you're selling consulting, you're selling coaching, or you have a course that you launch and you launch your course and you do a $10,000 or $20,000 day, whatever's big for that person. Yeah, it's easy to do all the hard work that day. It's easy to do the fundamentals that day. It's easy to stick to the script on that day because everything is, you're getting the fruits of your labor are showing. But let's say nothing's happening. Let's say you launched the product and nobody bought, or you're trying to sell something and nobody's answering the phone, or nobody's calling you back, or your emails are not getting responded to. Will you still show up and do the work on that day? That's the third day. And that's what separates the pros from the amateurs, because anybody can show up and do everything that's asked of them when everything is working. But when things are not working, do you show up on that day?
Hello and welcome to Pathways. I am your host, Amber Stitt. And today we welcome DreAllDay Baldwin. Welcome to Pathways, Dre.
Excited to be here, Amber. Thank you for having me.
So excited to have you. As I was mentioning to you, I've known about you for years, met you through the Clubhouse circuit, and to be able to hang out and talk about your work and how you got here is so much fun. So I really appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to what you got.
Okay. So really I want to focus on the third day, if that's okay with you. Do you think you can hang with me on that?
Absolutely. I think so.
Okay. So there's a lot in here that I think really applies to Pathways. The point of the podcast for us and the audience is to show different ways that you can build success, and everyone's got a different path. The third day concept, you wrote a book here, and we're going to be referring to this book a lot today because the way that you got to your success, I think, is important for people to hear this, but then how you transitioned in your own way. You chose this from what I've understood. And I really want people to think about this for their own lives. And when you talk about third day, can you just break down just high level? When you talk about the third day, what does that mean in life and business?
The third day is a decision that separates the pros from the amateurs, Amber, and it's all about how you can systematically and strategically set yourself up to show up and give your best effort when you least feel like it.
Did you always have this work ethic for yourself?
No, I had to develop it. So when I got into certain situations, which I'm sure we'll talk about, that kind of put me in position to develop it. And then it became a normal habit for me. And then I was using it without even knowing that I was using it for a long time. And then when people started asking me certain questions and I started to explain and articulate the method behind what I was doing, because they could see what I was doing.
Yeah.
That's when I finally stumbled across, okay, there's a whole process here to what I'm doing. And I realized that it wasn't normal because the way people were asking about it, and I could see that people needed it. And that's when I started to package it up and make it into a thing that I could then, now you got the book, now we got this whole framework and all of that.
So going back, when I'm talking about, the audience doesn't know this yet. So let's step into the choice of leaving basketball. And I say it was your choice because you didn't leave because something happened. And you talk about how you might show up one day as a professional, and sometimes you don't have that gainful employment because circumstances might have changed. Something could have happened, or like an injury, things that are outside of your control. So what were you noticing at that point where you're saying, I'm going to step out of this athletic role and move into the next thing or things for yourself? Was there a catalyst or something that happened to you that made you push forward to that?
Yeah, there were several catalysts. So we had to go back in the story, and I'll just tell you how the seeds got planted. So the first thing is when I was in college. So I graduated college in 2004 and I played basketball from 2005 to 2015. So in college, maybe about 2002, I got introduced to the concept of entrepreneurship through somebody, luring me to a network marketing meeting. Now, of course, I didn't stay in network marketing, but I appreciated the experience because I learned a lot about entrepreneurship through going to a few of those meetings and things that I never learned in college, even though I have a business degree. So in those meetings, the seeds got planted for becoming an entrepreneur because I liked the prospect of that better than the prospect of what, for example, I had seen my parents doing every day when I was growing up. And they worked, quote unquote, regular jobs. They did some small business stuff, but entrepreneurship was a whole different world. And those network marketing meetings also introduced me to personal development, a phrase that I had never heard before. I was always into reading, but I didn't know there was a genre for just making yourself better. And also because they always said in the meetings, if you're going to build a business, you have to build yourself too. And I said, that makes perfect sense. That's right. So I didn't know if I was going to build a business yet, but I said, well, I'm going to start building myself now. So I got more into personal development because I've always been a big book reader. And also they mentioned the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki.
I was going to ask you, like, this sounds like, when you're talking about your parents, and it's not that they're not working hard, but
they didn't have the entrepreneur mindset. They could do small business stuff. They could basically take what they were doing as a job and do it themselves, and they could become the boss, but you're still doing a whole lot of work. So the entrepreneurship thing was planted by, again, the network marketing, the reading Kiyosaki. Okay. And I said, okay, whatever Kiyosaki's talking about, I'm going to go do that after basketball. Because again, I'm still in college and my aim was to go play ball. So I figured I'll play ball first, and after ball, we know sports careers are very short. I'm still going to have plenty of life left after basketball. So then I'll go on that business. So I just had that seed in my mind. So it was about 2009, 2010, about halfway through my career. At one point, the phone was not ringing. So no calls are coming in. I'm a free agent. I don't know if I'm gonna get another job. And that's when I started to build what became my online presence, which was my website. I started putting out what we now call content every single day. Mm-hmm. I built what people now call a personal brand through what we now call social media. So that was, again, all about 2009 when the phone wasn't ringing. So that's when I also started creating my own products. And I had read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, where he basically took a lot of the Rich Dad, Poor Dad principles, and he showed people how to apply them to the digital world, because now he was talking about how to do it on the internet. And he's the first person I ever heard say, you can hire a person in the Philippines or in India who you never met and they can work for you. I said, man, that's a great idea. And I just took a lot of that stuff that he was saying and I started to apply it. So that's when I started to build a brand. So the last half of my basketball career, I had a brand going on the internet in addition to being a professional athlete, because we got a lot of free time on our hands. So it was 2 jobs, but a professional athlete is not a lot of work. We don't work 8-hour days.
Right.
So I had the time and the space to do that stuff. So most people these days, as a matter of fact, I was coming out of Trader Joe's this morning here in Miami, and this guy was looking at me, said hello to him. He said, man, I know you from somewhere. He knew me from YouTube, like the basketball time. So more people know me from YouTube and the internet. Nobody knows me from playing overseas, because most Americans don't watch overseas basketball. Yeah. So even though I had played, nobody knows me for that. They may know that I did it, but nobody saw it. You know what I'm saying? It's like
stealth
you did it,
mode.
nobody saw it.
Doesn't matter.
Like it never actually happened. So in 2015, when I stopped playing, to answer your question here, finally, the catalyst was I knew I wanted to get into professional speaking once I found out that there was an industry for people who could just stand on stages, give a speech and get paid for it. I didn't know it was a thing. So what I had done in about 2013, I was playing basketball with some guys local here in Miami. And this guy said, well, if you want to do speaking, have you heard of Toastmasters? And I had heard of it, but I didn't know what it was. So I go to a meeting. And when I give my introductory speech, I just say, I want to be a professional speaker. That's why I came here. I thought maybe this might be the place to do it. I was wrong. Toastmasters was not the place to do it. But there was a guy in the audience who was an NFL player, and he was retiring at the same time that I was thinking about being a pro athlete. A pro speaker. I knew his name, but I didn't know his face, because, football players, they wear the helmets.
Yeah.
So I just saw him. I said, here's a guy. I didn't know who he was. But then he approached me and introduced himself. And I said, I heard that name before. And then I put the name to the face. And he said, I'm about to go to this event where it's nothing but professional speakers. These people get paid to speak. When I meet them, I'll pass you any information that I get. Turned out he was going to the NSA, National Speakers Association convention in San Diego. He comes back with one contact person. He gives me their information. I cold call that person and I tell them who I am. I tell them what I'm doing. And they said, well, you can come meet me we can sit down for 30 minutes. I can tell you what I know and you can take it, do what you want with it. That 30-minute meeting lasted 3 hours.
Wow.
And the reason the meeting lasted 3 hours, Amber, is because I was just taking notes. I was basically writing down everything she said. I was like a court stenographer. Basically taking notes on every word she said and writing it all down. And she would just pause a few times while she was talking and say, is this helping you? Is this useful? And I said, yeah, keep going. And I showed her the notes. I had like 20 pages of notes from all the things that she was explaining. She was really explaining not professional speaking, but the thought leadership space.
Right. Which
I didn't know existed. And thought leadership, for those who don't know, that's just people who are selling their intellectual property. So you're selling your ideas and your insights rather than selling a physical product. So these are book authors, speakers, coaches, consultants, etc. And she was in that space full time. And I saw that there was an opportunity for me to get in that space because I had some intellectual property. This whole thing I was calling Work on Your Game. And I had translated a lot of the stuff that I learned in sports into things that people who didn't play sports could use. So I was writing books by this point, had courses, and I wanted to get into speaking. So that was the catalyst to answer your question. The catalyst was that meeting, and I met someone who was already in the game. So I figured, okay, she knows the game.
Yep.
Or there is a game. I can get in it. And that's where I started.
Okay. I hope I don't forget everything I want to ask you. You mentioned something. You noticed that people were coming to you for some specifics. And years ago, there was a gift that you maybe didn't realize you had it until you had it. People are coming up to you and asking for this intellectual property, essentially. You had this system being developed. And I think it's important for people to know that they can create business and entrepreneurship out of things that they're great at and really run with that. In a flip side, with this woman you're meeting with and you're taking these notes, you're seeing the potential of something that she's worked on her game, giving you advice, and then you're incorporating that into your own world. I think that's the magic of the entrepreneurship now that more than ever. If you can provide a solution for somebody, that's a business. We can think of things so much differently now more than ever.
Absolutely. And it was also the professional speaking angle came from when I was making videos really targeted towards the athletes, but when they started asking about mindset. So I just started talking about mindset by itself, not really for sports, but just mindset, period. Yeah. And that's when people who didn't play sports started telling me, hey, this stuff is valuable for us. And then people would kind of jokingly say, Dre, you sound like a philosopher. You sound like a college professor, the way you're breaking these things down. And then somebody mentioned you sound like a professional speaker. And I said, that's interesting. I didn't know there was a such thing as professional speaking. So I just had that in the back of my mind. So then when I found out that that was actually a thing, that someone can pay you for standing on the stage for an hour and talking, that's when I said, okay, I can get into that space because I know I can speak publicly. And now it's just a matter of, how do you sell it? How do you package it up? How do you learn about the industry, which is a whole other business within itself?
Let's talk about that. So I believe years ago, maybe still to current day, that you are really trying to help athletes see another vision. It's not just the game. It's not just the skills that you're being hired for that game. You got to think about other levels. And the reason I'm bringing this up is when we study the Kiyosakis or other entrepreneurs that are pushing into 6, 7 figures and beyond, they all have multiple revenue streams. They have strategic partnerships. They've scaled. There's this common, you and I have talked about workshops. There's these bigger players out there that talk about ways you can really scale and go beyond and hit these heavy numbers. It's like when you study the athletes and even celebrities, they're not just doing their game. They're working, they're speaking the presentations. They might have their apparel. I think a lot of times we don't realize that they're hustling all the time doing multiple things to have this success. It's not just that one movie or that game. It's beyond that. And so you have helped people with that business mindset coming out of being, or while they're an athlete, but that's part of your work too, correct? Is coaching that athlete out into the business world.
Sometimes I do. It depends on who the athlete is. So most of the people who we work with these days, they're not athletes. Maybe they played in college or something like that. But these are people who have full-time businesses and they just want the mindset. Our framework is based around mindset, strategy, systems, and accountability for implementation. That's what we help people with. So yes, we do have some transitioning athletes. I work with quite a few of them. But our target, you don't have to have any connection to the sports world.
And on that note, though, if we study the successful ones, that's where I was kind of heading at. You're able to help people see the systems, and the systems are important. I want to talk about shadow work. I felt like you've already been talking about things that you're doing, like all this content you were pumping out back in the day. Is that considered shadow work in your world where you're not always monetizing right away, but it's a part of that consistent branding?
Yeah, I did 5 years of that with nothing to sell. I had nothing to sell from 2005 to 2009. So I was not selling any products. I didn't even have an email list. Amber, all I was doing was just putting out content, and my name was starting to get known through word of mouth. And at this time, there wasn't even ad revenue on YouTube. So I was literally doing all this work, and I had no aims to making money from this because I was playing basketball professionally. That's all I wanted to do. It was only when I found myself unemployed. And at the same time, what happened? Google purchases YouTube. So now you can make money from making videos. Then I made these products, and then people started saying, well, this mindset stuff is very useful. So all this stuff kind of started to happen at the same time. And I still had 5 more years of a career to play. So that's how I started to build the runway before I even got out of sports.
The reason I wanted to bring that up, there's a quote. I'm going to pull it out from your book. I love this. Set a goal to have your longevity outlast your luck. Lames look for luck. When you're a pro, luck looks for you. So that's really, you're playing the game, you're building content. You're not really sure how it's going to monetize. The point is you need to be doing it, even if you can't see this conversion to sale yet. That's what I take from this, because by the time something changes and you need to pivot, you've already still have a business. It's just how you implement from there.
Yes, that's right. So you can take the pieces of what you've been doing, if you've been building, and you can apply it in any direction you want. Because again, I pivoted. It was a big pivot from just talking about basketball to talking to people who never picked up a basketball. But the foundational pieces, the foundation that I had laid in building Work on Your Game is still useful, even if I'm talking to someone who didn't know me in the basketball days. So you're right.
You're listening to Pathways with Amber Stitt. For more episodes like this, plus so much more, check out the podcast page at amberstitt.com. Let's take action together. Now let's get back to our episode. Now, I'm not going to pretend I'm very proficient in sports, but I had attended a workshop that talked a lot about Kobe and his technical skills and working on his game. First guy in the gym in the morning, it didn't matter. It was like the footwork. Anyway, that's where I feel like when you talk about consistency, is it kind of like picking up your own Kobe-minded actions behind the scenes when no one's watching? How important is that?
People call that the Mamba mentality is what you hear. Because Kobe, he called himself the Mamba. So
okay. The third day. And as I'm reading this, I'm thinking about Kobe. You mentioned him, and I had seen some of the work behind like his training. It didn't matter. He went down to the basics. The basics are important. And I think that's what you mean by it's not luck, because you're doing the work, even when you can't actually see the monetization yet. It's all important. You have to put that work in. You talk about consistency in your book.
Yes, absolutely. Of course, you have to put the work in even when you're not getting the return on investment, because that's what the third day is when you're doing a lot of work. It's like if you have a day and you're selling something, let's say you're selling consulting, you're selling coaching, or you have a course that you launch and you launch your course and you do a $10,000 or $20,000 day, whatever's big for that person. Yeah, it's easy to do all the hard work that day. It's easy to do the fundamentals that day. It's easy to stick to the script on that day because everything is, you're getting the fruits of your labor are showing. But let's say nothing's happening. Let's say you launched the product and nobody bought, or you're trying to sell something and nobody's answering the phone, or nobody's calling you back, or your emails are not getting responded to. Will you still show up and do the work on that day? That's the third day. And that's what separates the pros from the amateurs, because anybody can show up and do everything that's asked of them when everything is working. But when things are not working, do you show up on that day?
I like the systems aspect. So how are we going to get people to take this consistency seriously, to take massive action? Some people will say, well, I just don't have the motivation. We got to do the work. So are there some pieces that just must be there for that successful person? You got to have these core elements.
Absolutely. Well, number one is we got to have a North Star. What's the goal? What is it that I want to achieve? So if someone says that I don't have the motivation to do the thing, I would get a lot of athletes who would say that to me back in the day. They would send me a message and say, well, Dre, hey, I want to work on my game and I want to get good because I want to play in high school or college. I want to play pro, whatever position they're in. They want to get to the next level. And they would say, but I just don't have the motivation to go to the gym and practice every day the way that you practice every day. So could you help me out with that motivation? And my answer to that question was always no, I can't. Because if I was to help you today and get you motivated to go to the gym, well, who's going to help you tomorrow when you're not motivated to go to the gym? Because I'm not always going to be around to do it for you. And I would conclude by telling them, if you're not motivated to do the work that is necessary to succeed in this lane, then get in a different lane. Yeah. You're probably not going to make it as a basketball player if you're not motivated to go to the gym and work out. It's just like an entrepreneur. If you're not motivated to get on the phone and make calls, you're probably not going to close too many sales. If you're not motivated to send emails to your list, you're not going to sell your course. If you're not motivated to do whatever it is that leads to the outcome, then you probably shouldn't be trying to get that outcome. Maybe you just need to find a more compelling goal. So motivation is connected to having a compelling goal. When your goals are compelling enough, then you will be moved to want to do the things that lead to the outcome. You
talked about personal development, thought leadership. In Pathways, we talk about step one being focusing on talents. I think that's really the North Star. You need to know the purpose, the why behind it. That can take care of itself sometimes. I know it has for me. But yeah, if you're not feeling it, you might need to get in that other lane, maybe choose another path, as we might say on our podcast.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I was going to add to that is when you're clear on what you want, which is the goal, and why you want it, which is the motivation, inspiration, reason, energy, etc., all in the same group. When you know the what, you know the why. The how is the bridge in between the two. But when these two are strong enough, then the bridge will present itself. You'll find the bridge when these two are very strong. When you have a serious reason and you're really solid on that reason, and you know exactly what you're trying to achieve, you have a clear outcome, then you will figure out the how, because how is the thing that we are inundated with in our world today. There's plenty of how to out there. There are a million different hows for pretty much any challenge that you have. So that's often not the problem, but often people will say that's the only thing that they're missing. I just don't know how to do it or what to do. And once you do a little bit of digging, you realize that they're not really clear on what the goal is, which is why it's so hard to figure out how to do it. Or they simply haven't taken the necessary steps to get the right strategy to apply the how. Because again, you can come up with 100 different ways to launch a podcast, 1,000 different ways to read a book, 50 different ways to create a course, 200 different ways to start a coaching program. So if you're not clear on your outcome and what you want, then all those hows can start to confuse you. Yeah. And if you're not clear on why you want to achieve the outcome, then when you got all these hows presented to you, let's say they cost a certain amount of money. Okay, well, you don't want to make the investment. Well, why not? Why don't you want to make the investment? Maybe is because your desire to achieve this outcome is maybe not as strong as you thought it was. Because when the desire's there, then people will do what's necessary to get to the outcome. They'll narrow down to find who is speaking the best to them, who has the best approach, at least from what you can surmise, and take the next step. So sometimes people do have access to the how, they just don't want to make the commitment. They don't want to take that next step because, again, the outcome is not strongly enough at pulling them, and the why is not strong enough at pushing them. So they end up in this kind of no man's land and analysis by paralysis, trying to figure out what to do, even though it's clear what they should do. They just don't want to do it.
I love talking about the how, but outside of thought leadership and just the mentorship with maybe a conversation, a podcast, a video, sometimes you have to pay for the how to get done. And that's where I think once you plug in and start investing in that, it's like magic. I know I've seen that in the last few years for my business. If I literally take it seriously and invest some money into it, that's been where the revenue starts to pick up, because not everyone knows how to do everything. And that leads me to you and how you help people. So with the how, kind of keeping that in mind, how should people find you and what can you help people with? Present day, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but outside of the books, Dre, talk to us about how you are building systems for people and helping people in their work.
Well, the main place we do our work is through workonyourgameuniversity. That's where we do all of our consulting, all of our coaching, all of our programs are under the umbrella of the university. So our program is based on 4 specific areas. Mindset, which is the foundation. That is the way you think. That is the way your subconscious mind is programmed. So it's not just about taking in information on the surface, but it's about altering the programming of the subconscious mind. Our whole framework for that is called the bulletproof mindset. The second step is strategy. Strategy is simply a plan of action. And to create the plan of action, what we use is what we call a reverse roadmap, where we basically deconstruct from the goal back to where we are right now, your starting point. And then we plan out what are all the steps that are going to be necessary in order to get from where we are to where we need to go. Understanding that not everything's going to go perfect. We got to plan in contingencies and different branches of the plan just in case things don't work. Third step is the system. The system is how a strategy gets implemented over and over and over again. It's how do we create a mechanism so that we can do the same things the same way every time? So you take, for example, McDonald's. If you go to McDonald's where you are, I go to McDonald's where I am, we both order the same thing. It'll look exactly the same. Nobody can tell which one came from which McDonald's because the system is so tight that everything comes out the same way every time. And this is why anybody literally could work at McDonald's as long as they can follow instructions. Because the system is the most important aspect, is not the person. Starbucks, same thing, and many other companies. That's the system. And then the fourth part is the accountability. How do we make sure that everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing? How do we make sure that everything is doing what it's supposed to be doing? Because sometimes the system is broken. We got to fix it. If the strategy is not working, we have to fix it. And if the people are not working, we got to fix them. So that's the accountability piece. And all of this is based on us achieving the goal. And once we're clear on what the result is that we're after, then we work through all these 4 steps to get people where they want to go. So this is what we help people with, both on an individual level, on a team business level, and also, like we talked about, like professional speaking, training, workshops.
The last thing I want to ask you for today is a little sidebar on the younger folks, the younger generation. They have so many opportunities to learn, not from education in the classroom. Like you mentioned in business, how many things did we not learn about business in our business degrees, which I have one too. So since you do have a little man, or just little people in general, it could be as young as 5, which my daughter's 5 at this point, to say Gen Z next, that next generation. If you want the younger folks, like what would you tell that younger generation today? And I mean, I don't think that they're too young. We can start at the very young point, teaching them how to be successful. So I know that's kind of like a sidebar question, but anything that you incorporate just for your little man even now?
Well, he's not even 2 years old yet, so I can't teach him anything just yet. He's not ready to absorb sentences. But when he is old enough, he's going to be required to read all these books you see behind me. He's going to read everything I've ever wrote. And he's going to listen to all my stuff, because everything that, sometimes I get younger people who come to me and say, Dre, well, what would you tell your younger self? Like a college age person will say that. And I say, the answer is every piece of content that I put out. It's something that I would tell my younger self. So something that I say today is something that I would have told myself last week if I knew it last week. So maybe I just found out about it. And now, as far as when you say a younger person, I need a specific, because a 5-year-old and a 22-year-old, those are 2 different conversations. So which one am I talking about? I mean,
but you're saying that you're evolving present day. So it's really the evolution, keep innovating, keep learning. But now let's go back to, I know that your son's young, but he's watching you work. And I guess that's my point. At any age, you bring him to work, he's seeing you do the work. And I think that's important to have them see us in our element so they can see what's possible.
Yeah, that's right. And I always think about that, because by the time I had him, I wasn't playing basketball anymore. So I was thinking maybe he's going to be pretty tall. He'd become a basketball player, but he's watching me sitting in the office wearing a suit. So he might just want to go straight to entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
But, I think he still has the genetics for sports. So we'll see if we can get him into sports, even though he's not watching me play. So hopefully, but overall, the biggest thing I would want for my son is that he understands entrepreneurship and that he has a financial education. Those are the most important things. If he plays sports, it's great. But if he doesn't, that's all right. But he will know how to be an entrepreneur. And he will understand money.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you being here with us today. We're going to link up all the ways to find you online and for your university. So Any parting words, any takeaways you'd like to share before we close out today?
Yeah, everybody can at least, even if you're not in the university, at least get yourself a copy of that book that Amber has there, The Third Day, The Decision Separates the Pros from the Amateurs. So we give everybody a free copy of that book. We just ask that you cover the shipping. Just go to thirddaybook.com. The book's free. Just cover the shipping. So get yourself a copy of that book. At least get started in our world by getting the book.
Love it. Yeah, thank you. I got mine. We appreciate you being here today. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Pathways. For more information about the podcast, books, articles, the blog, and so much more, please visit my website at amberstitt.com. And remember, let's take action today. Thank you for listening.